What is going on, alpha males? How about some alliteration to get this podcast started? How about cool Cold War kit? That's what we're going to talk about today. Hopefully that interests you. Welcome to Alpha Male Podcast. Hopefully welcome back to the podcast where we talk about what it means to be a man, made in the image of God, strong, dominant, in control. And I make no apologies for that. With that, I'm going to put in a quick bio, and then we'll get into the main topic.
First and foremost, I am a Christian. That is number one in my life, serving God, following Jesus. Combat veteran, served in the United States Marine Corps and the Army. Also law enforcement veteran, private contractor, state rifle and pistol champion. Professional big game hunter and guide. If you feel called to support, check out Patreon. There should be a link in the show notes. With that, I am your host, Michael Milito, and I am blessed to serve you today. Now, the Cold War spanned a large swath of time. Now, without getting too nitpicky, I'm going to consider the Cold War from the end of World War II up into the 90s, up until the Berlin Wall going down. Much like many things, I don't think it ended abruptly that day. But if we consider the Berlin Wall coming down kind of the seminal moment that marked the end of the Cold War. To quote Reagan, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. That represented a big chunk of many of our lives. And it shaped a lot. And I don't view the Cold War as a good thing. As a man who's been to war, hot war, I'm a man who seeks peace but prepares for war. But I think we've gleaned a few really beneficial things. Cool things that came out of the Cold War. And the criteria I use for this is things that the average man, the average kind of John Everyman, might use and benefit from. Now, I know there's a lot of veterans that listen to this, and I thank you for your service. But I wanted this to be a broad spectrum. Like, obviously, the people in the military in that time, a lot of things came out of that we still use. But what about the everyman? What did the Cold War? What's some cool Cold War kit that we got some benefit from? Because there was a large technological and hardware arms race during that time. It did spur innovation. So let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. So I made a list of things that I could think of. And I'm going to start with the thing that got me thinking about this. It's not necessarily the best one on the list, but it's really cool. I think a lot of people use it. Campers, hikers, outdoorsy type people, hunters. And that is the Air Force survival knife. The Air Force survival knife is a really good all-around outdoorsy survival knife. If you said I could only have one knife, I'll be honest, it wouldn't be this one. But if you said you can only have one knife and it is this one, I'd be like, cool. It's not a bad choice. It is not a bad choice at all. I believe 1095 steel. It's got serrations on the back, which a lot of people don't like, but I do. I actually use Sawzall knives. It's got a groove down it. Make the grass grow, as the Marines know. Now, as much as I like the K-bar, and I do, and I carried it more, and I have a K-bar, and I don't have one of these knives. If I'm being circumspect, if I'm judging soberly, I honestly think the Air Force survival knife is a better all-around knife. It's a little bit lighter, a little bit handier. If you can't apply deadly force with the Air Force survival knife, you're probably not getting any real advantage with the K-bar. It is bigger for sure. If you were asking me what is a better combat knife, for sure, the K-bar. If you're asking me what's a better all-around survival knife, I'd say the Air Force survival knife. Good backpacking, camping, like one big beefy knife. That Air Force survival knife is a really cool piece of kit. You can still get one. They still make them new. I saw one the other day when I was in Cabela's. I had one hanging up there, and it wasn't a lot of money, and I thought, maybe I should just buy one. And then I thought, I need one of those like I need another AR-15. But it's a really cool piece of Cold War kit. If you're not familiar with this and you want some exact numbers, Ontario, they might not be the only company that makes it, but they make a pretty authentic one from what I'm aware of. It's the 499 Air Force Survival OKC-6150. Really cool piece of Cold War hardware there. Now let me talk about another one that's probably far more broad spectrum, so much so that you may not even realize it. How about satellites? Yeah. How about satellite navigation? Now, satellites have been around a long time. Satellite navigation has been around a while, but as far as being common, like you just pulled it up on your cell phone. When I was a police officer in LA, it still wasn't common. We had a Thomas guide, and we would have to look up a street by name if we didn't know it and know where it was, and flip through a manual and then plan out a route in our head and drive there and hopefully not get lost. That was in the mid-2000s. But satellite navigation has become common. You know how convenient it is. If you're in a new city, if you're like me and my wife who live as neo-nomads, very blessed to be provided for by God wherever we go. We pull up in a new city and we don't know really where anything is, and we're like, oh, I want to find the Winco or whatever grocery store. And we can just pull that up on our phone. We don't have to drive around aimlessly. You know how much nicer that is. Now, I still think you should have the analog skill of having a Rand McNally or a Thomas guide and flipping through there and being able to navigate that way. I really do, because one day those satellites may not be there. Or in a giant disaster emergency, even if they're there, a lot of times those networks get jammed up and they don't work. So knowing analog is good, but how convenient is it to have satellite navigation? It is awesome. And that's probably the most broad spectrum one on the list. It probably gets used by the majority of people the majority of days in our world today. Really a game changer as far as human navigation goes. The ease at which you can navigate, and efficiently and effectively. Pretty cool Cold War arms race benefit that we all get to glean from. Going back to camping and being outdoors and any kind of that, if you're into survival or just being outdoors, that military tritium lensatic compass, talking about having the analog skill, but having that good tritium compass, like that's a pretty awesome navigation tool. There are compasses way before that, but you talk about a rugged, compact, foldable, practical compass that if you know how to use it and have a map, you could likely find your way anywhere on Earth. And you don't need satellites. Likely, if you've served in the military anytime in the last several decades, you are familiar with it. But you don't have to have been in the military. It's a great piece of kit if you like doing anything outdoors. From fishing, to hunting, to camping, hiking, just reconnoitering, just recon out in the woods. It's a great piece of kit. If you consider yourself a prepper, a survivalist, a good thing to have is a good rock-solid compass. Kamenga, if I'm pronouncing that right, is who I think produces the military one today. I think it may predate that. I'm not a compass historian, but a rock-solid compass. Now, any compass can break. You can break anything. Anything like that can go out of calibration. But if you want a good backup navigation tool, that lensatic compass, and I think it might be the M1950, that's a good piece of kit. Now, I could go down a deep rabbit hole. Maybe I'll do an entire episode on gunfighter life. If you don't listen to that podcast and you're into guns, it's a whole other podcast about guns. But just briefly to rattle them off. The AK-47, the M16, the FAL, the Glock, the Beretta 92. Arguably some of the best military weapons of all time coming out of the Cold War. And you might argue that the AR-15 is something used a lot by the average civilian in America. There are many, many American civilian gun owners, and many of them own AR-15s, and that's awesome. But I don't want to get too far down that rabbit hole. I want to keep this for a more broad spectrum. It wasn't all military developments, though. Let's not forget about the space race, Sputnik, and putting a man on the moon. Not military, but very tangential. A very close tangent shooting off from military arms race. The space race. No, I am not putting Tang on the list or freeze-dried ice cream sandwiches. What I am going to put on there is the Mylar blanket, often referred to as a space blanket. I think those are awesome. Those are great. I don't know that they have saved my life, but I can tell you I've been out in some pretty miserable weather, hunting in the mountains of Idaho, and got a little bit colder than I probably should have, and it was really, really nice to have a Mylar blanket. They're so lightweight and so compact. I think they belong in any kind of hiking kit, baby bug out bag, big bug out bag. They're so lightweight, and they do actually work. They're not a gimmick. They can virtually eliminate wind chill, which is a big factor. They reflect your own body heat back. They're not as good as like a big expedition sleeping bag, but you're talking about something that can fit in your back pocket that could potentially save your life. Those Mylar space blankets are just amazing. And we have, I think, the space race to thank for that. And by that measure, the Cold War. One of the guns I am going to discuss, because although designed for the military, it's not like a combat rifle. It is the M7. And I think this is something a lot of people use that aren't just into the military type guns. Again, backpacking, hiking, survival, canoeing. If you don't know about the M7, developed for pilots in the 50s, kind of that early era of the Cold War, for downed pilots to put meat on the table. Just a quick tangent of my own. If you look at the earlier survival rifles, it's pretty clear they were designed for men that would be in those situations that knew how to hunt. If you look at the new Air Force survival rifle, it's very much just a foldable AR. There's nothing wrong with that, and it has its advantages, but that tells me that a lot of men going into the military today probably don't know how to hunt. I think that's a skill we should get back. But the M7, it's a lightweight, semi-automatic takedown 22. In fact, it takes down and fits into its own stock. It even floats. And again, semi-automatic. So if you're looking for a really cool bug-out bag gun or kind of longer expedition in the wilderness type gun, especially one for some kind of marine aquatic environment, you might look at that M7. It's pretty cool. It's pretty handy, lightweight. Also, the ammunition is lightweight. So I didn't want to turn this into a gun episode, but I think that's a gun that applies to far more broad spectrum than just military and combat style of firearms. That M7 is a really cool gun and has a really cool history of its own you might want to check out. And they're still being made. They're not like something that was made during the Cold War. Henry, I think, bought the rights to those, and you can still get an M7. In fact, not too long ago, I saw one at Walmart. So they're still, fairly available for somebody that wants to have a decent outdoor survival rifle in 22. How about the MRE? Now, if you've eaten a lot of MREs, you probably got sick of them, as I did. They're not the best food, but they're pretty good for a military ration compared to what came before it. Like, as much as I got tired of those things in Iraq, it's better, almost certainly, than hardtack, than, dried sea biscuits. It's almost certainly better than that, far more nutritious. I think that's a pretty cool thing, and I think a lot more people have MREs and eat MREs than just the ones that serve and just veterans. Probably veterans eat them the least because they had enough of them. But that's a really cool thing to have like a day or more's worth of calories in that pouch. And you field strip them far smaller. And you get a little bit of variety there. So I think that's a pretty cool technology that came out of that in that era that was made for the military, but certainly can be used for far more than just the military. Those MREs. Next, the one I think that is really good as far as surplus kit goes, and I think a lot of people use it outside the military, the Alice pack. I might go out on a limb and say, as far as mass issue packs, the best pack that's ever been issued. I think after that, we got a little bit ridiculous as far as the packs go. I came in when they were doing the early Molly packs, and they were just too big. And if I think you give a unit a bigger pack, they're going to try and fill it with stuff to the point where we might have looked comically like geriatric Ninja Turtles trying to make it through the desert, because we had so much stuff in those packs. I think the regular size medium Alice pack is probably the best pack the military's ever had. And the cool thing is, since they stopped using them, at least on a mass scale, they're probably in limited use in some units still. But as far as a mass issue, that means you can get them pretty well and pretty affordably surplus. And they're a phenomenal pack. The frames can be a little bit fragile, but if you're not throwing them off the back of a 7-ton or a deuce and a half, or running over them with your truck or whatever the case is as a civilian, they're probably going to last you a while. And if you don't abuse the frame and you have a sewing kit, they'll probably last you your lifetime. They're an awesome pack, and I think about the right size for most people. More is not always better. I wish sometimes the military saw that. The fact that you can carry more kit is not always better. I know I'm getting off on a side tangent here, but I think we way went over tipping the scale on the firepower versus mobility thing. Just so much kit that we were expected to carry that we'd almost never use. But we just had it. Why? Because we had a big pack, so you might as well put something in it. But do you really need 2 sleeping bags and a poncho liner and a poncho and a bivy sack and maybe a tent? Like, you probably don't need all that stuff as an infantryman, as somebody that was infantry. Anyway, back from the tangent, the Alice pack is a good piece of kit that you can have and own. Whether or not you served in the military, it's an awesome backpack. I don't think it's the best pack ever. I think there are a lot of better civilian packs. I really like Eberly stock. I like the Eberly stock Gun Runner and the Just One. But as far as a good, affordable, surplus military pack, that Alice pack, awesome. Awesome piece of Cold War kit. The next one, and next to satellite navigation, maybe one of the best ones on the list, Woodland camouflage pattern. That woodland camouflage pattern is an awesome pattern. As somebody that served in the U.S. Marine Corps and the U.S. Army, and when I joined the U.S. Marine Corps, I was issued woodland, to give you an idea of when I served. Now, I went on to all the way into being clad in multicam. But I joined in the woodland days, back when we had the woodland BDUs and polished our boots, even in the desert, black polished boots. But that woodland camouflage pattern is an awesome pattern, and I think I've been issued at least 6 different camouflage patterns in the military, not including private contracting or more specialized assignments I did in law enforcement. To be fair, I think the multicam is a better pattern and a better uniform as a whole. However, you look at that, it looks remarkably, maybe suspiciously like woodland, and radically different than the ACU, which in my opinion is the worst one that I've ever been issued. Maybe they looked at that and said, that old woodland was pretty good, let's make it a little bit better. I don't know that for sure, but That Woodland is a good pattern. If they reissued it, it would be a fine pattern. If you like being outside, if you like hunting and you want good, affordable camouflage, that Woodland pattern is good. And they didn't just put it on the uniform, they put it on all kinds of kit for a long time. Such a good pattern that I think that was the last time that all the branches of the armed forces used that same camouflage pattern. It's a good one. And as a Marine that did have Marpat stuff, Marpat's not bad. It's a pretty good camouflage pattern, but is it honestly any better than Woodland? And the multicam, I think, is a better pattern than Woodland, but maybe slightly so. That Woodland is an awesome camouflage pattern. Now I want to end this with something kind of fun and entertaining. Another really cool thing we got out of the Cold War era. Red Dawn. Red Dawn's pretty cool. It's a pretty good movie. I don't own a TV, haven't owned one in a long time, but I've seen Red Dawn. It's a good movie. And if there's a movie that kind of epitomizes the Cold War, that's a pretty good one. So if you consider yourself a survivalist, a prepper, or just like that kind of post-apocalyptic genre, and you have not seen the original Red Dawn, maybe a homework assignment, a fun extracurricular for this podcast. First, make sure you've read your Bible today. If you haven't read your Bible, do that first. But if you have, and you want some good entertaining content, the original Red Dawn. A really cool Cold War movie, kind of epitomizing the maybe state of mind and cultural aspects of the Cold War. And like a really good, entertaining, post-apocalyptic genre movie. Anyway, with that, hopefully this was a fun, entertaining topic today. Did a pretty in-depth preaching, railing against modern culture in one of the recent episodes. So I thought it'd be nice to have a lighthearted Cold War kit chat. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to like, subscribe, leave a comment. If you want to support this podcast, if you want to support, I consider this first and foremost a ministry, and I don't apologize for that. The mission statement to make godly men strong and strong men godly. To show men that they don't have to be apologetic for being a strong, dominant man, no matter what culture and society says. The right way, with God at the center. If that's something you want to support, consider becoming a patron. There should be a link in the show notes. Business here in the U.S., small employees number, this guy. Veteran operated. If that's something you want to support, consider becoming a patron. With that, as a thank you for listening, tactical tips of the day. A couple. We talked about that compass, and it made me think about dummy cording. If you're kind of new into the hiking, preparedness, hunting world, dummy cording, that kind of essential kit that you really don't want to lose, is important. Talking about satellite navigation, I carry a small hockey puck size GPS. It's about that same size, obviously probably much lighter, but it goes in my pocket. But it doesn't just go in my pocket. I actually take the lanyard and loop it through one of my belt loops, dummy cording it. So that if I'm sitting down or go literally head over heels down a hill or something, that I still have that GPS. If it doesn't break, it's still on me. Do the same thing with your lensatic compass. Maybe have a small piece of paracord or microcord so it's attached to the pouch that it comes in on your kit. And dummy cord that pouch, so in addition to how it normally attaches, you also have a cord or a zip tie so that pouch doesn't come off if the snap comes off. And then have a lanyard with the compass on it so if the pouch opens, you don't lose your compass. Things like that. Things that are kind of maybe mission critical. Dummy cording is something pretty common in the infantry, but maybe if you're outside of the infantry, you don't really think about dummy cording, but maybe you should. Another one, talking about field stripping those MREs. One thing, and field stripping makes them far lighter and far easier, and you can carry more of them. I don't generally deal with MREs now. I usually just honestly go with almonds or something similar, peanut butter, sardines, because I've had enough MREs. But if I was going to carry them, I would field strip them. One thing that I would keep is that MRE toilet paper. One, for its intended use. If we learned anything from the COVID pandemic, I guess it's that people panic. I guess that's the main thing. People are very fearful as a whole, I think. sadly. But secondary or tertiary lesson from that is that toilet paper is important, right? I don't really think it is. I can do that task with many other things. Doesn't really bother me. But that toilet paper, in addition to being used for its intended purpose, is good for a lot of other things. Could be used as a bandage. It's absorbent. Could be used for cleaning stuff that you want a good, clean, non-abrasive material for, which is not as easy as it sounds if you've been out in the bush for a while. Also, if you're big into hunting and slaying beasts and eating them, and I don't apologize for that either, marking a blood trail. You see a little spot of blood, it's in the fall, there's red leaves, there's this, there's that. One, you can test it, hit it with that MRE toilet paper. If it soaks up and is red, then it's probably blood. Then you can leave a small piece of that and make a trail so that you can more easily follow the blood trail. And if you get off the blood trail, you can easily go back to the last place that you saw the blood trail. And many other uses, but it's small, it's compact. There's a lot of toilet paper they fit in that little teeny bundle. So that's a pretty cool tactical tip there. The tactical verse of the day. Jesus speaking in the Gospel of Matthew. Let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let no one on the housetop go down to take anything out of the house. Let no one in the field go back to get their cloak. How dreadful it will be in those days for pregnant women and nursing mothers. Pray that your flight will not take place in winter or on the Sabbath. For there will be great distress, unequaled from the beginning of the world until now, and never to be equaled again. Jesus says in the Bible to watch and be ready. Watch and be ready. Are you watching? Are you ready? Thanks for listening, and have a blessed day.